All right, welcome to the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. It's a Thursday night. We promoted this one a little bit. We sometimes just jump on Thursdays, trying a little different opening now rather than a little countdown clock. We'll keep tweaking this thing as we go. Looking forward to my guest tonight. It's been a minute since we've been able to talk, but we're going to talk about our background together, how we came to know each other. And we're going to talk about her background. And on the topics tonight, we're going to talk, of course, about the school shooting. And we're not going to try to give any publicity to the shooter, but we're going to talk about the situation. I don't like to use the names. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in DC with this precipitous drop in crime, thanks to Trump basically doing the task force method of pulling people together from different agencies and giving them an opportunity. And we're going to chat about that with my guest. And then we'll finish up with talking a little bit about the FBI, what we think's happening there, what the opinions are about Cash and Dan and how they're doing thus far. But I want to bring on, and Mr. Producer, if you'll go to my screen share, I want to bring on my good friend. This is Betsy Brantner Smith, and she is the host of the National Police Association podcast. She's a retired cop. And as you can see from her bio there, she is a trainer, author, consultant, mom, and grandma. And I'm getting ready to join her in the grandparent thing. My granddaughter, first grandchild, will be here in just a few weeks. It's like waiting on Christmas. And Betsy and I first came to know each other via Chris Salcedo. We had done a side-by-side talking there. I've been paired up with some pretty cool people on Salcedo's show. Mr. Producer, you can come back to me and we're going to bring in Betsy. I've been paired up with some pretty cool people on Salcedo's show. Back in January, I had the honor, and I think I may have been the last person to appear with him. That was Bernie Carrick from I still remember him on 9/11 when I was a young FBI agent, and Bernie and I got to appear right before the inauguration of President Trump and talk about security. And the biggest honor that I gave that he gave me was calling me by my first name. Salcedo always calls me Mr. Hinkle, except when we're talking on the phone. And for Bernie to call me Chris. And then when I went off on one of my typical rants about our politicians not representing us and how they won't use the power of the purse, and I saw him smiling and nodding, and that just warmed my heart. But let's bring in Betsy Brantner Smith, the one of my favorite people in the whole world. She had me on the National Police Association podcast in November, and it aired in December. Got a lot of good feedback on that. That really stoked the fire of my brother-in-law producer of trying to get me to go on with the podcast. But Betsy, welcome to the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. It's been a minute.
Hey, it's so great to be with you, and I'm so glad you brought up Bernie. I also got to appear side by side with him many times, and getting a smile out of him. What a great honor, because it doesn't happen very often, right?
Yeah.
And I so miss his commentary.
He had that cop look in the in around 9/11 with that thick mustache, and looked kind of like a bulldog and all. Great guy. I was honored to have appeared with him. I'm going to keep that. Can't wait to show that to my granddaughter one day and explain about this hero from 9/11 out of New York. Well, Betsy, from my viewers that we have out here, the probably one or two that we have on YouTube, because we just got started, but the hundreds that we likely have viewing in on X right now, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you and what you're doing and what you're up to?
So I started police work in 1976. That's how old I am. And as a senior in high school, as a police dispatcher, I dispatched in college. 3 weeks out of college, or 2 weeks out of college, became a cop in the Chicago suburbs. Did that for 29 years. Did all kinds of specialties. Just had a wonderful career. And kind of parallel to that, I was doing a lot of training and video training and writing for all the police websites and magazines and things like that. And after I retired, I continued training And in July of 2020, I want everybody to think about what was going on then. The National Police Association, who I'd done a little writing for, asked me to become their spokesman, and it's been an incredible 5 years of doing that, and I'm so honored to be able to speak in the media for our brothers and sisters in law enforcement.
Yeah, it was a tough time there for a while, especially with the defund the police movement, out there really dominating the news. And I'm seeing we'll we're going to talk a little bit about this when we talk about the FBI, but I find myself now trying to defend the young FBI agents that not just doing their job, but it's just a different function inside. And I see them being attacked by all of these people looking to take somebody to task for January 6th or any of that stuff. And I try to explain to them how the management was the problem there. That, when you're at the street level, and I'm sure it's that way as a street cop, when you get an arrest warrant, that thing's already been adjudicated. It means it's a judge has made a decision that Betsy or Chris, you're going to go bring this person into the courthouse. And you don't really have a lot of say so over it. You can decline to do it and suffer the consequences. But when you do that, somebody else is just going to do it. So you got to figure out how you're going to affect the change. But we're going to get into that with the FBI. So the Chicago PD time you were there, did you bump into Hal Linden at all? I understand he was.
I was in the suburbs, and
Okay.
although I did a lot of task force work, so I did a lot of work in Chicago. I also trained at Chicago PD as a trainer in the last number of years, most recently in 2020. But no, I did not. It's a big agency.
The only other person I know from Chicago PD that wasn't former FBI, and I did have a connection with him because I worked backstage for him when I was in the Air Force, and that was Eddie Money.
Ah,
Apparently, Eddie Money was a Chicago PD officer at one time. I was kind of surprised to learn that. But he was a nice man. I know he has since passed, but I had the opportunity to be backstage security for him at a concert down in the Panhandle of Florida. So tell me about the National Police Association podcast. How do you guys come up with your guest of who you're going to have on and feature?
That's a great question because I'm always looking for new guests, and what we do first and foremost is we look at people who are leaders in the profession or personalities in the profession. One of my very first guests was Sheriff Mark Lamb, and he and I only live about 20 minutes apart. And we used to run into each other at legislative district political meetings, and he's just one of the best guys. He's one of the best guys out there that we've trained together at various conferences. So he was one of my first guests, and but I've talked to everyone, all the major law enforcement unions. I've talked to everybody from Chuck Marino, who's frequently on Newsmax and Fox, to Tom Homan, who's a great interview, but a little cranky. I'm just going to say that. And just a lot of terrific men and women. I kind of have a special affinity for people who work with dogs in any capacity. So I've actually had a number of dogs on my podcast.
Okay.
And I very rarely bring anybody back for a second interview, although I may have to talk to you about that. But guys like Zeke Arkham, who's a big police influencer, I brought him back twice. I think I brought Brandon Tatum back twice. But anybody who's influential in our profession or has something interesting to share law enforcement wise. I've interviewed a bunch of politicians. The National Police Association, we don't endorse candidates, we're a charity. But I have talked to a lot of politicians who are pro law enforcement and talked about a lot of different legislative initiatives, including Ted Cruz. He was my recent guest. He was really generous with his time. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. We have it on YouTube and on X and everywhere you can find it online, both audio and video, and it's a lot of fun, as you know.
Oh yeah, I had a blast with it. I don't get the opportunity. Well, I really don't even take the opportunity to talk much about my career. I have my CV, but it's just kind of one of the I don't know. I guess it's just the character of the FBI agent when I came in. We really didn't talk much about what we did. I have some friends of mine that our kids played soccer together, and we were on the sidelines for probably about 3 years before they knew I even worked for the FBI. It just never really came up. But I know you've had my friend John Nance on, and John and I have become fast friends. We have not met in person yet, and but he's part of a little text group that we just kind of came together. I think that God pulled it together back in around 2020. I had reached out to him because I was interested in doing some writing, and I saw he was writing for townhall.com, and at the time he was still in the FBI, and I was trying to figure out how he navigated that. That led to me reaching out to another guy that I asked, and he has not been on your podcast, and I am shocked that he hasn't been on there. Jim Galliano.
Oh, he was one
Jim,
of my first guests.
really?
Yeah.
He just had hip surgery, so maybe the meds he forgot or something like that. But I mentioned it to him, and he said, "I don't think I've been on the show."
Well, I need to. Well, yeah, I think he was one of our first guests, but that was in the early days.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, I need to get him back.
He finished up his 2 terms as mayor of Cornwall on the Hudson. He's got a great story to tell. People think that I know everybody in the FBI. I've got there's a reporter from the New York Sun that periodically, texts me something, and I'll read one of his articles, and I'll say, "Hey, that person you referenced in there, I don't care too much for him." And he goes, "How do you know him?" And I said, "Well, we were first office agents in Washington Field, and this is kind of a backstory." And he goes, "Is there anybody you don't know?" And I said, "It's a small world. There's a lot of retired FBI agents, but Jim is a great guy. He's having been mayor, he was former hostage rescue team member, which
Yeah.
that's the Navy SEALs of the FBI. I mean, the guy's got some stories. He was showing us pictures today of when he and the SWAT team deployed down to New Orleans. And I'll ask him about it. We have to look
Yeah,
back.
ask him. And maybe I have that wrong, but I just have to tell you that an hour ago when I was at the gym, I was listening to him on Megyn Kelly's show.
Okay.
I think he was on yesterday or the day before yesterday. And
Okay.
yeah, and because I actually was he was talking about, he talked very briefly about his mayoral stint, but he's a phenomenal guy and he's so knowledgeable.
I thought he would have made a great deputy director. I lobbied
I
for
think
that.
you're right about that.
He
Yeah.
called me up. He goes, "Man, you got to quit saying that." He said, "My phone lights up when you put that out there that I should be deputy director." Um,
We
he's
need signs. I think you're right. Yeah.
but he is a great guy. He's kind of helped me with some of this media stuff after I started appearing on television and radio. He's done it big time where he's actually been under contract doing that stuff, and I think he's getting back into that now. Uh, I actually missed an opportunity to be on Fox and Friends not long ago. Another person, have you had Maureen O'Connell on your show?
I don't think so, but I know who that
She's
is.
somebody else that's pretty amazing that I would recommend. I can put you in touch with her.
That would be
Um,
phenomenal.
she had reached out to Gags and I. There was she couldn't do a stint on, and it's kind of the way it works. We usually get a text or something like, "Hey, I can't do this. Can you do it?" And she had reached out to Gags and I about going on Fox and Friends. And by the time I saw the text, I said, "Sure, I can do it. Is it video or are we doing just audio only?" Gags texted me and he said, "Hey, I didn't hear back from you. I'm actually driving into the studio. So if you got a chance to be the in studio guest, I can't begrudge you that." But he's like, "Dude, I was gonna, you were gonna have it, not me. We're constantly giving stuff to each other." Nance and I are the same way. That's how I ended up doing I did a time on Kimberly Guilfoyle's show,
Mhm.
and she was pretty sweet too. Got to talk to
She
her a little bit.
really, really supports law enforcement, or
She does. She and I chatted. We actually have some mutual friends. I was kind of surprised
that's
uh,
awesome.
because
Yeah,
I
and going in studio is so different. That's something that we did, exclusively um prior to 2020, and
uh,
my husband too, he would, when we lived in the Chicago area, the limo would come get him, and this is back when, believe it or not, everybody, MSNBC was an actual news station, and
so
the limo would come get him. He'd go down and do that. And but now, fortunately, I think it's so nice to be able to do things via Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever, because sometimes going into studios is a real pain. We have a couple of studios here in the Tucson area where I live, but they're 25 minutes away. They're hot, they're cramped, they're not necessarily in the best neighborhoods, to be honest. And but Pete Hegseth brought me and three other cops into the studio in New York. And that was something I'll always cherish, except that it was during the time when New York wouldn't let you set foot in there unless you were vaccinated.
oh
And
my
so that was fascinating. But and a whole other story how we pulled that off. But
God.
it's media is interesting work.
Yeah.
I think
It's
especially for people who've been in our profession.
I actually was in I was actually in 1211 Avenue of the Americas. I still remember it. May of 2001. Yeah, we were up there doing a search and arrest on a Russian. We had driven up there from Washington Field, and a friend of a friend is a producer there and got me in. I was surprised at how small the sets are. It's not that big. We went and sat in on the Fox and Friends set, and I met David Asman. We went upstairs when Bill O'Reilly was still there, and he was out, but I did leave a book. He was kind enough to sign it for me, and Sean Hannity signed a book for me. So it was an amazing time. Well, I want to get into why I brought you on. You have, Mr. Producer, if you'll go back to my share screen, I've got what Betsy posted here, and I have to put my glasses on to read this. There are 400 million guns in the US. The vast majority were never involved in criminality. The fantasy that gun bans, buybacks, and other new gun laws will stop gun crime is nonsense. We must embrace physical prevention, armed security, etc., prosecution, and mental health treatment. Mr. Producer, we can come back. I could not have said that better myself. You want to talk about what prompted you to put that out there?
Absolutely. I'm so frustrated with the last 30 hours or so when we're talking about the Catholic school shooting in Minneapolis, and these clowns, and there's just no other way to describe it, especially Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis. I've seen an incredible evolution of their police chief just in the last 30 hours. But Jacob Frey talking about, and other politicians, Amy Klobuchar and so many others on the left, including Gavin Newsom, talking about how we've got to ban guns and it's the Republicans' fault and this and that. We are not going to ban guns. That ship has sailed, and that's what I want people to understand: how many guns there are in this world, and also understand that guns don't commit crimes on their own, and most gun owners are law-abiding citizens. Now, I know the shooter in Minneapolis, he got his guns legally. That's a problem, not with the guns, it's a problem with the system, because this is a young man who had clear mental health. But remember, we have been told now that being of one sex and thinking you are another sex is not mental illness. It's a-okay. So that's why his gun ownership, his gun purchasing was legal. So maybe we need to stop looking at the guns, start looking at mental health, like I talked about. But when we're talking about places, especially like schools, we need to talk about physical security. What do I mean by that? Everything from a good guy, multiple good guys with guns, to physical layering, and all kinds of other things. We've got to have conversations about this rather than politicize everything and say, ban the guns and all of this.
What's the saying? If it's if you need help immediately, law enforcement will be there in minutes. So
Yeah, exactly. When
don't
seconds
have time
count,
to wait.
we're going to be there in minutes.
So the in talking about this, what I get concerned with, and this is one of the problems I had with Pam Bondi coming in as AG, is she was pro red flag laws. What are your thoughts on red flag laws as a cop? I'm betting it's pretty close to mine.
Well, let me say this. I think a lot of people don't understand what red flag laws are, which, by the way, Minnesota has red flag laws, everybody, just so you know. But I'll tell you, a lot of law enforcement officers, there's a guy on Fox News named Paul Morrow. You probably know who he is. He's a
Yep.
really good guy. He provides some really great commentary. But even he said the other day after this shooting, he goes, well, we really need red flag laws. I don't think a lot of police media people even understand what they are and how they can be abused. I also believe that, and this is one of my frustrations with media in general, is people in the media organizations tend to be in New York, right? The big national ones, and so they get very New York centric folks on their show. The way the guns are viewed in New York and in places like my native city of Chicago, or even in Illinois, they're very anti-gun cultures, or just no gun cultures. So they don't really understand the Second Amendment. And I know a lot of even when I was a young police officer, they taught us in the academy. I went to the police academy in Cook County, Illinois, just outside of Chicago, and they talked to us about how citizens shouldn't have guns, and that's how we were talked to as young police officers, and part of it was because this was a state that did not have citizen carry. There was no citizen carry in the state of Illinois until I think it was 2013. So anyway, back to red flag laws. They can be used like so many other of these types of laws. They can be used nefariously. And we've all, any street cop has seen the wife or the ex-wife use laws like that to put some hurt on a soon-to-be ex-spouse, things like that. And I don't want to see that happen. I would equate it to, I used to be a child sex crimes investigator. I can't tell you how many kids I had to interview because the soon-to-be ex-wife said, oh, my little girl said daddy touched her. And it was just because she wanted more money in the divorce or whatever. She wanted to ruin his reputation. That's the danger with red flag laws. They will not be used properly, in my opinion.
The danger I look at with it, and this is what I would debate Pam Bondi on. I mean, it's kind of hyperbole, but it's not. When I haven't lost a debate on the constitutional debate stage. It usurps your due process rights. It gives someone outside of your due process the ability to infringe upon your liberties. And that person is an agent of the government. You can't do that. So, I don't want, because I know we went through a while here. It was probably back in the early 2000s where doctors would ask you, how many guns do you have in the home? Do you have guns in the home? Oh, none of your business. Well, do you carry guns? Yeah, I'm carrying one right now in your waiting room right now. So I said, just always assume that I'm armed. But I'm an absolutist. I believe that your constitutional rights are absolute. They shall not be infringed. it's when you use your constitutional right in a way that infringes upon somebody else's rights or violates a crime. So you can own a gun, you can carry a gun, you can use the gun to protect yourself. You can't commit a crime with it. You can't just go out and randomly kill people or, shoot up property. So that I don't I don't look at it as something that infringes on your Second Amendment rights. You've made a choice to use that tool.
Well, and that's the thing, and that's why we're not going to legislate our way out of this.
Nope.
That's what people need to understand. That's why when we're screaming about scary rifle bans and red flag laws and this and that, we cannot legislate our way out of this mass shooter issue. It just isn't going to happen, and that's why we've got to have serious adult conversations about other things like truly protecting our children. How about if we just protected our school kids in the same way that we protect our politicians? How about that? Or how about if we really have a real grown-up conversation about mental health in this country, and especially mental health as it relates to these types of shooting incidents. And when we're talking about Minnesota, Minneapolis in particular, we also need to talk about why their police department is 40% short. We need to talk about the continued damage of the defund the police movement, and why that needs to be part of this conversation, at least in the Minneapolis shooting.
Yeah, the with this issue with people not wanting to have the candid conversation, and that's why I put out, early this morning on X. I said, well, I hear that people are having a tough time talking about this and using words. Well, here's some words for you. A mentally ill transgender domestic terrorist killed some kids. It happened in Nashville. It happened now. No, what I do like and I know we're going to talk about the FBI in a little bit. I do like the way that the Cash is handling this and going ahead and addressing it for what it is. I got so frustrated with Chris Wray, and I was demanding, why are we holding up the manifesto of the transgender domestic terrorist shooter that shot up the Covenant schools? It befuddled me that why it wasn't released, and I kept trying to get to the bottom of it. And I had some news outlets in Nashville contacting me, asking about it, about who is actually holding it up. The FBI would say, well, it's the locals, and the locals would say, well, it's the FBI. It was the FBI holding it up, and that used to frustrate me with Ray when he was called to testify on it in Congress. I'm sorry, I was in the FBI for over 20 years. There is nothing that the FBI does that cannot be briefed to the people's representatives. You can do it behind closed doors, you can do it in front, but they are responsible for oversight for us. And you don't get to use policy to usurp their constitutional right for oversight. And I understand that you're going to have some politicians that are going to abuse that right and misuse that information, but you still, deal with that when it happens. But the people have a right to know, what are we doing in law enforcement? And when he says, well, I'm not going to answer that, it's an ongoing investigation. All right, well, let's go behind doors. You tell me what's going on.
The National Police Association had to sue the FBI to get that manifesto, and actually, the actual court case is still going. And the only reason we didn't want to release it, we didn't want to see it for salacious reasons. We wanted to see it for training and information reasons. And here we are, 2 years later, we're still talking about what? We're talking about violent transgender people. Are all transgender people violent? No, they are not. But when we look at some of these mass shooters, school shooters, parade shooters, this and that, we see some incredible similarities, and we need to start looking at what we're doing to young people who are confused, who have mental illness, who are taking, hormone blockers, SSRIs, things like that. This is one of the things the FBI does, right? They study these types of criminals. Why wouldn't we want all the information? And why wouldn't we want to put it out to the locals?
that frustrated me, and I want citizens to be able to prepare themselves. Not to
Yep.
deviate off the topic, but even during the COVID overreach by the government, I having been in government for 33 years, counting military, OSI, and then FBI, I said I understand that the government was caught flat-footed in March of 2020. I'm willing to give you about 60 days to get your ill-prepared act together. And then you tell me what the threats are, but I get to decide how my family is going to comport to it. And I'm not going to acquiesce on my civil liberties for you to do that. I'm going to engage in commerce. I'm going to freely associate with individuals. I'm going to practice my faith and go to church. And I'm going to be with fellow Christians. I'm going to travel where I want to go. I'm going to walk into the store. You can't keep me from engaging. You can't shut down small businesses and then tell me I can only shop if I obey your rules. So I pushed back on it, but I did it civilly. Never had a problem. Never got arrested, anything like that. Um, so real quick with cash, Mr. Producer, if you pull it up and I got it highlighted, I was really pleased with the fact that he quickly put out an update to what was going on with the attacks from this individual. And he put in there, it's a male subject. We're going to deal with facts. The same thing that happened with the Colorado shooting, he quickly called it terrorism, domestic terrorism, when that individual was throwing those Molotov cocktails at individuals. So I give him kudos on that. I do have some constructive criticism with some of the things he does, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I want to switch gears now to well, actually, here's another one here with this. This individual said they were tired of being trans. Well, okay, is that supposed to be justification for going and killing kids? It some of the stories that come out, I'm wondering what the purpose is. More often than not, it's confirmation bias from the author. Mr. Producer, let's go back to Betsy here.
Let me say one thing about this headline
Sure.
that's up now, though. Um, these kids, and remember, he was 17 when his parents took him to court and let him change his name from Robert to Robin and let him decide that he's a girl. I'm politically involved here in Southern Arizona, and I'm an ally of a group called Gays Against Groomers. They are out there, and they've been all over this, trying to get people to understand that these kids, that the under 18, really under the age of 25, young people that are being encouraged to transition are being sold a bill of goods. And I think that's what happened to this shooter. Is he was obviously told that transing to another gender was going to, and this is, I've talked to kids that have been transitioned and then that have detransitioned as adults. They're told that this is going to make you happy, this is going to make your life great. And he in the manifesto, in the video, I watched the whole video a couple of times, I read the whole translated manifesto. This kid is like a lot of kids out there who is finding out that this social contagion that he was sucked into, I believe, just Betsy's opinion, by his mother, he's finding out he was sold a bill of goods. And I think that we need to know what kind of medications was he on, what, if any, surgery had he had, and what, if any, kind of mental health counseling or other care had this shooter had that pushed him into this truly demonic state that he ended up in before he killed 2 kids, injured so many others, and took his own life.
Yeah, I hope we get to the bottom of that, and there is some accountability with the people that this is just ghoulish what they do to kids. And I hope that the families can get some closure. They need the answers as well. It should be something where the investigators, as they get information, if the families are open to it, they should be able to sit down and tell them, here's what we're seeing and here's how we got here. They got to have that communication in there. I'm confident that Cash and them are going to do that. I hope they keep it up. So let's switch gears to DC. precipitous crime drop in DC. Imagine that if you flood the zone with cops and just people, and even though it's military, it's technically a neighborhood watch. If people just walk around and, are witnesses to you trying to engage in nefarious activity, crime drops. It's amazing.
Carjacking's down 84% in the last 2.5 weeks. It's crazy. I can't tell you how many media interviews I've done about juvenile carjacking in Washington, D.C. No, it's extraordinary. And you know what this is? Now again, of course, because you and I love the Constitution. We have to recognize that the District of Columbia is a very unique situation. And Trump has authority there. The DOJ has authority there that they don't necessarily have in other cities. But why wouldn't you want what is happening in Washington, D.C. come to your city? And this is something that I've suggested during numerous interviews. Wouldn't it be incredible if Governor Tim Walz called up Donald Trump and said, Mr. President, my people in Minneapolis right now are frightened. They just had, including the school shooting that we had yesterday, Minneapolis, the city of Minneapolis, it just had a really, really bad 24 hours. Crime's out of control. Police department's 40% short. Yes, they work with their federal partners there in Minneapolis and St. Paul and with the county. But wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be comforting to the people of Minneapolis to have a huge show of force with federal agents, including, those FBI, those jump out cars. I love that. And I want to go on a ride along with one of those. And also the National Guard, to see those, guys and gals on the street corner in some of the worst neighborhoods. I think it would be very healing. And I think it would let people see that Tim Walz is a real leader. Now we know that's not going to happen, but that's Betsy's fantasy.
I can still remember when I first got to DC, we could take our family down to the mall. We could walk around. We could go and I've talked to friends that I still have up there that are like, man, I'm not going down there, especially after dark. I just hate that it's gotten that way. There was a time in the early 2000s. This was, I think it may have been pre 9/11. You started seeing some cleanup in Southeast DC. You started seeing some young urban professionals move in and refurb some of the homes there. And I can't tell you, there were times that we did a search warrant. We had a house that was, we were looking for drugs and gang activity, and across the street would be this young couple that just refurbished this house. And what ended up happening is the market value went up on those properties, and they priced out the bad guys. They couldn't live there anymore. And then somebody come in and refurbish that and sell. I hope that happens. I've only been to Chicago a couple of times, but God help you up there. We went on a tour. I went up there from FBI headquarters, and we were in town to do some work for the Rockford RA. And we were taking a tour, and we went over toward Cabrini Green. And I'm looking out the window. We took this ghost tour where we went to all these old ghost places. We went to where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was and all this stuff.
I love that stuff.
And we're doing that, but I'm looking out the window, and I'm like, there's drug deals going down. I can see this down the street. I was like, I'm not coming out of here. Yeah, I'm armed and I'm an FBI agent. And I have authority, but I ain't coming out of here by myself to try to take on somebody here. But I just looked at just open drug use, drug sales and stuff like that. And the Chicago police just has such a tough time dealing with that. It's
and right now they're about 2,000 cops short. It's extraordinary. And back when I'm glad you brought up task forces. You brought that up at the beginning of the show, because that's something I was very involved in the 80s when I was undercover, and I was on a task force, and I got loaned out to other task forces. The DEA didn't have a woman at that time to buy dope, so they loaned me out. My agency loaned me out constantly. But I'll never forget seeing Cabrini Green for the first time, and then actually buying cocaine in the Robert Taylor homes, both of which, by the way, are gone now. They imploded them, but and this is the thing. They public housing in Chicago. One of the things that they did with public housing is they tried to get rid of all the high rises, and a lot of those people they moved to the suburbs, hoping that they would give up their gang banging ways. And actually, what they did was bring their gang banging ways to the suburbs, and that creep continues to this day. Chicago is such a beautiful city, but I'll tell you a story. My daughter, that's also about to have a baby, about a year and a half ago, we went to Chicago because she wanted to buy her wedding dress there. She had fled the city in 2022, as did our son in 2020. They got out of the city. It just got to be too crazy dangerous, but she wanted to buy her wedding dress there. So great, we'll go. So what it should have been a wonderful time with lots of pictures for Instagram was a little bit marred because mommy has got 2 guns on and multiple magazines, trying to hide it all under my nice white mom of the bride suit. And I spent most of my time looking around, not in the 4 stores we went to, not necessarily paying attention to what my daughter was doing. And it shouldn't be that way. And unfortunately, and one of the things every time I go back, which I do frequently, that I see is even in the quote unquote nicest of neighborhoods and things, every restaurant, every store has security, but so often the security, they're just gang members. And so it's kind of like the old days where you hired the mob to keep your store safe. Now you hire the black gangster disciples.
I wish, that people would get on board with having retired law enforcement be able to carry. I've got HR 218, which gets me concealed carry, all 50 states. You are still going to have some problems. So if I get pulled over in New Jersey, they are going to arrest me, even though I have retired FBI credentials. I have a concealed carry permit card from Mississippi. I have an HR 218 card. I'm current on all of my training. They're still going to arrest me. They're still going to take my gun. And while they're processing me, then they will make a call to see if I'm legit. And then they'll release me. And then I got to go through getting the stuff expunged. They just make it really inconvenient. I'm of the mindset, and I hate flying, but I've done some here recently, is if you had, some retired FBI agents like me, let me carry aboard aircraft. I'll take the flying while armed training that I used to take every year as an FBI agent and handle what's going on. I don't have any arrest authority in there, but I have training and skills to handle stuff. The Not every flight has an air marshal on it. And I'm pretty confident that the flight that I took down to Tampa and coming back, even with the connecting, didn't have it on there, because you're probably like me. If you're in the airport, you kind of look around to see if you can spot who the air marshal is. It's sometimes not hard. Try to figure out who's who. But I think that having an armed individual on the aircraft, still adhering to the rules, you can't drink, you shouldn't be going to sleep.
And taking the training. I live about a mile from a facility where they do that kind of training for the federal government, and that's one of the things that's so frustrating. I travel a lot, and my husband and I, we carry our guns, but of course, we have to check them before we get on an airplane. And, and of course we have our LEOSA certifications and all that stuff. But I'll tell you, when I travel alone, very often I'll fly into places like Detroit or LA or whatever late at night, and I've got a class the next day. I've got to take an Uber or rent a car. And, I'm a 66-year-old woman. I'm not getting into an Uber, or I'm not driving a rental car in a big blue city, unless I'm armed. So I'm forced to get my checked luggage, sneak into the airport bathroom, and load my pistol before I go about my business, which is frustrating. And I shouldn't have to do that. You're right. Those laws need to change. There are people like you and me who are willing to put ourselves out there. We're willing to stay current with our training. Why not let us help? That goes back to our discussion about schools and churches and things like that. Why not us?
Yeah. Well, on the last thing I want to talk about with DC, I did see that the sandwich thrower wasn't indicted. That doesn't surprise me with the DC grand juries. But what people don't understand is assault is assault is assault. And I'm of the mindset if I'm out there on the street, you hit me with something, I don't care what it is, you're going to jail. You can argue about it, you can try to debate me. We'll let the judge figure that out, but you're going to go to jail. And I think if we had more of that, I was so frustrated during the riots and stuff that were going on up in Washington State and in Minnesota, where federal agents were being attacked and they were told to stand down, that they could not respond. That to me just blew my mind that would be allowed. And I'm glad to see that they're turning that around. So we've got a few minutes left here. You guys endorsed Cash for the position of director. And I don't even know who else was even in consideration for that. Do you know of any other names that were in consideration besides Cash?
You know what? Not off the top of my head, although I used to have a list, but once we heard that Cash was going to be the likely candidate, I'll be honest, I shut down and quit looking because
Okay.
I really we really believed in him. And I actually talked about um Cash with a friend of mine, Abe Hamadeh, who's a congressman here in Arizona. He used to be a prosecutor. He's a very he ran for our attorney general here. Now he's in Congress. He's just a great young man. He was Army. He's an attorney, all of that stuff, and has kind of a similar background, kind of a parallel background to Cash Patel's. And once Abe talked to me and said, would you guys consider doing an endorsement? I said, I don't know. Let me talk to the boss. I absolutely would. And the National Police Association, like I said, we don't get involved in candidates. But when we have somebody like Cash Patel, who we know is going to be, we knew he would be good for law enforcement because, one of the things that that others might not know is the FBI is the organization that goes after dirty cops.
Yep.
And
I think the FBI is the only one that can enforce 18 USC 242 color of law violations, deprivation of rights under color of law.
Correct. And we didn't want the organization to continue to be in a position to abuse that. And so we knew Cash Patel to be ethical, to be focused. And I think it was a good move to bring in Bongino to kind of as a balance.
He was not on my bingo card. He was not.
I thought maybe he'd be in the media wing of the cabinet or something. But
having been inside the FBI, and I like Bongino. I listened to his show. I like Cash. I followed some of the things that he did. I think he's fine as director. I think the problem with bringing Bongino in is it's always been a seasoned veteran FBI agent. And if you've ever, for people that have never been inside that building or looked at the way that the FBI functions, it's tough for even somebody that's been in 20 years to navigate all of that. And you bring somebody in that I guarantee you that first day I could have dropped Dan Bongino off on level B3 and said, find your way to the 8th floor. And he'd have a difficult time doing it. When I was a tour shooter in 2000, 2001, for the tourists that would come in, and they used to stand in line outside before 9/11 to come in and take a tour, and they always finished up with an agent doing a firearms demonstration. And I got good enough at firearms that I was able to get on that team, doing it part-time, half a day, once a month. And to even find your way to the indoor range, there's steps you have to go where you go down and up and then through a loading dock. It's not an easy place to navigate. The hallways are not easy to navigate. So having to do all of that, plus, the not even know who you can trust inside. Most of the FBI, when you come up, and I guess this is why I know so many people, is that Golden Triangle area of Washington Field, FBI headquarters, Baltimore, It's all in that area. And a lot of the movers and shakers in the FBI are groomed and built and make their bones in that area. So I've worked with a lot of the people that it was amazing as I got older that I would see their names in the news. I did not work with Pete Strzok or Andy McCabe. I did meet him a couple of times. But some other people that had been in the news, I had one-on-one conversations with. And I think that it would have been better to have somebody like a Jim Galliano. And he's probably watching this and he's, trying to get out of his chair after hip surgery to yell at me. But he's got the respect, he's got the bona fides, he's got the experience, he's been a politician, he knows how to navigate this. And you're making the train run. You basically run the FBI. So I think somebody like that, I think if they would get somebody, if you're not going to do that, bring somebody in like a Galliano that can be kind of like your consigliere. What are your thoughts on this Bailey guy, the Attorney General, being brought in as co-deputy director? Now we got two people that have zero FBI experience sitting in there. The saying is, and I don't know if you're a football fan or not, but if you got two quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. What are your thoughts on
that? Trump likes to break things, and I appreciate that about him. But and I think that's what he's doing. And I think, going back to talking about Bongino, I think he's going to stay the whole 4 years. I don't. I could be wrong about that. But the same thing when it's just like giving he's given Marco Rubio like 4 different jobs, right? And so I'm not a big fan of a anything when it comes to being the boss. You need a boss. Yep. And people in this type of government we need, when it comes to law enforcement and the DOJ and things like that, you need that clear chain of command, and without it gets confusing, and so I'm not a big fan of that, but I sure like watching it.
It is a lot of drama. So, but I don't want the drama there. I did think that Trump in his first administration made a lot of mistakes with some of, putting Jeff Sessions in as the Attorney General. I thought was a huge mistake. Rex Tillerson. People probably don't even remember that name. Rex Tillerson as your Secretary of State. I just think that he allowed other individuals to make those recommendations and he delegated it to them. And he's trying not to do that now. But this, with what the FBI needs, and I wrote an article on this, it really just needs to get back to the foundation of the Constitution. With everything that you do, it has to revolve. You have to be able to articulate how this protects and defends the Constitution, from physical fitness to firearms training to your legal classes. And it really needs to get back to that foundation. And I think they got off track with a lot of the people, the Merrick Garlands and the Andrew McCabe, the Pete Strzok, Kevin Clinesmith that violated the law and usurped Carter Page's Fourth Amendment rights. I was speaking out on that. I'm like, this is illegal what he just did. He should go to prison. I would have gone to prison. He got like 6 months. But I think they're slowly getting their legs under them. I'm hesitant to give them a grade right now, but how do you think they're doing as far as restoring the reputation of the FBI among the citizens? What are you hearing?
Well, yeah, I hear that from citizens. I hear that from my students. Unfortunately, the FBI had gotten this terrible reputation under Obama, then kind of got rehabilitated. And then under Biden, it was just, a terrible, it was terrible. And I would have students that were FBI agents come to our classes and they wouldn't tell anybody they were FBI agents. And which you should be very proud of whatever federal or state or local or county police department you're on. You should be part of your agency. You're proud of your agency. And so now what we hear is we're back to, and I hear this from agents themselves, we're back to doing police work. State and local cops are like, yeah, the FBI is back to helping us. And we're grateful for that. And again, you brought this up, and this can't be said enough. You brought this up at the beginning, the task force concept. This is something that the FBI is so good at, and it really it's being brought back. It's being properly utilized, and I think also, and you would know this better than I, we're seeing FBI agents coming back to being real cops. They're doing not just the investigative work that they're known for, but the physical work, the tactical work. And I just love seeing that, because I have some of my cops became FBI agents, and I was so proud of them. And I know they've been proud of their careers, but it's a great time, if you were or are in the FBI, to be able to hold your head up and say, yeah, we're back to the mission. Cops need that sense of mission. Whatever part of law enforcement you're involved in, you need that mission for your mental health, for your officer survival. And I think you guys are back, baby, and I love it.
Well, I don't feel like we're totally back yet. I still have some recommendations, and I am old school. You and I are not that far apart in age. And I would bet if I asked you to close your eyes and envision what an FBI agent looks like, if I said, Betsy, what does an FBI agent look like? What's that FBI agent wearing when you see them in your mind?
They're always wearing a suit, nice shoes, and the same haircut.
Yep. So when I see cops, FBI agents showing up on Ring doorbell cameras with untucked polo shirts, cargo pants, and hiking boots, um, that doesn't command respect. You've got to look the part. I told people, and I know you know this as a cop from Chicago, when people show up at the bank robbery scene and they're looking for who's in charge, they're looking for either the guy in the uniform with the stars all through here, or they're looking for the guy in the suit. They're not looking for the guy in the cargo pants. If you want to be a DEA agent, that's what I used to say, go be a DEA agent. They wear the polo shirts and stuff. But you got to look the part. And I think I was fortunate enough to have some really good leadership when I was coming up in the FBI that advocated for that. They would say, I remember the Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Alex Turner, saying, if I see you around the office and you're not in a suit, you better be able to have me a damn good reason why you're not in a suit. You make a lot more money than other people. You need to look the part. You are a professional, and you need to look professional. And he would say, if you went to the range and you came back to the office to work, change clothes and put your suit on, because you never know who you're going to bump into, and you got to be able to make that first impression. I don't think I would have worn the fedora. That was a little bit much, but I did work with some Hoover agents that when I got to Washington Field that were still wearing the fedora and stuff and talking about Mr. Hoover. And I was just so honored that I got a chance to chat with them. Got a chance to work with a true Hoover agent, a man that I wish you could have had a chance to meet, and he would have been amazing. It would have been your most popular podcast on the National Police Association, and that is a man named Jim Ingram. Jim was on the original Mississippi burning case back in the 60s. And when I got down to Jackson, my squad, we reopened Mississippi burning, and we brought Jim back as a contractor to work with us, because he still knew everybody in the state. He knew where, the Klan was and all this stuff. And he helped us. We put 2 Klansmen in prison for killing those civil rights people back in the 60s. So unfortunately, he passed away in 2009, but just a great man. He would not tell me for sure. And I asked him every time I saw him if he would confirm that Gene Hackman's character in the movie Mississippi Burning was based off of him, because they both were bald. They're both about the same height, kind of gruff and stuff. And he goes, no, he wasn't. And I said, you're lying. I know you're lying. Dude, come on, you're lying. But I would have loved for you to have met him. Well, Betsy, we're rolling up on the end of the hour. It goes by fast when you have somebody that's so interesting to talk to, and that is you. I like your podcast, and I've kind of modeled this one after it. We just have a conversation. We talk like we would if we were sitting in the room together about, what do you think about this? Any final thoughts? Tell us what you got going on. Tell us where people can find you. Tell us about the podcast and where they can find that.
I'll tell you what, and I so appreciate doing this because I do love having these conversations. Thank God that we have this technology now that we're able to do things like that. You can find me on X at SGT Betsy Betsy Smith. You can follow the National Police Association at Nat Police Assoc ASSOC. You can go to nationalpolice.org and you can see all the incredible things we do. We are not a union or something you can join. We are an incredible advocacy group. We are constantly filing friend of the court briefs and getting involved in legislation, and then they put me out there to speak for this profession and really tell the truth about what we do. We're a charity, so if you go to nationalpolice.org, hit the donate button, and you're going to be seeing me this weekend on Newsmax and I think on News Nation, and I'm always on Fox at least a few times a month, and Sirius XM 125 The Patriot. I do some of that work, and but I really appreciate being with you, and I love the things you post on X.
Well, thank you so much. And I know we have some mutual connections and stuff out there. And I hope you and Rob Chadwick get together. I know I shared that information with you on the text. Rob's a great guy. His voice, when you meet him in person, his voice looks like he sounds like he looks. It's just,
I
he's
love
really
that.
highly trained. I think you're going to enjoy talking with him. And I'm going to get with Gags and ask him about his appearance on
I
here.
just sent you his appearance in a direct
Okay,
message.
okay.
But I'm going to give him credit, not just because he's drug addled from his hip replacement, but I interviewed him pre-cancer when I had kind of longish brown curly hair.
Uh-huh.
I don't look anything like that anymore. So I'll give him an excuse, but I need to get him back because he's amazing.
He is amazing. Well, Betsy, thank you again. I promise you, as soon as little Sutton Grace gets here in a couple of weeks, I will share the pictures with you. I will send it. I probably won't be able to pry a smile off my face for months and months and months, but I am excited about it. Thank you again for coming on the Blunt Force Conservative podcast, and I can't wait to have you on again. And let's do a Newsmax hit. We'll get with Salcedo so we can get back on there again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks. All right, Mr. Producer. Well, welcome back to me. Thanks so much for Betsy for coming on. She is such a treasure. Um, we're going to do a quick shout out, and then I'm going to call it quits here. We're going to try to have a show on Saturday, and my brother-in-law has an idea to kind of maybe get away a little away from the politics and from the news of the day, because I was born and raised in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the center of the football universe. Alabama's playing Florida State this weekend. There is so much football going on Saturday. We may just come on and talk a little football and give some prognostications. It may be a short show. Can't promise that. But I want to go back to, I've got a friend of mine, Mike Mahoy Adams, that's out in Seattle, Washington. And Mike, he's real quiet. He doesn't tell you all these people that he knows. And out of the blue, I get this connection from Kevin Corke from Fox News. And I like Kevin Corke. I like watching him when he's on Fox News. And he followed me on X. I'm like, okay, how did this happen? I don't think I've ever mentioned him on X. And it turned out that Mike and he were friends. And he said, hey, this is some guy you ought to follow. And Kevin has been great. And we've DM'd each other a couple times on X. He's real busy there in the news. But recently there was an individual that was commenting on Kevin and how good of a job he does, and said, listen, I'm not getting paid to do this. I think he's a great guy. And I responded to it, and I said, not to flex or anything, but Kevin Corke follows me on X. And he kind of laughed. Well, that person, if we'll go to my share screen, Mr. Producer, is Rush Limbaugh's brother, David Limbaugh. David is an amazing individual. I have been a fan of his with his writing, very strong, man of faith in Christianity. He talked about, leading Rush to Christ. And I'm happy to hear that. Rush, I never got a chance to speak with him the numerous times I tried to call in to his radio show. I did get on the Clay and Buck show twice. I got on the first week that they were on and chatted with them on their Friday. They were looking for, former law enforcement to call in, and I got right through. And then, about a month later, I got through again. But David Limbaugh followed me, and I sent him, and you come back to me, Mr. Producer. I sent him a DM. I haven't looked to see if he's responded to it yet. When my wife and we had only been married a short period of time, we were in the Air Force, and we were being moved from Panama City, Florida, down there at Tyndall Air Force Base to Rapid City, South Dakota, to Ellsworth Air Force Base. And this was in 1993. And any of you that were around back then, remember there was this huge flooding problem through the Midwest. And so we were traveling during that time, and I convinced my wife. We pulled out the map that we got from Walmart because you didn't have Garmin's or anything like that back then. And we're going through the pages, and she let us. She said it was okay. It was me, her, and her dog, and our dog. And we're traveling in this little Ford Escort, and we made a deviation to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, where Rush Limbaugh's from, and his family was still there. So we came into Cape Girardeau. I went to a phone booth and looked in the yellow pages. His grandfather's law firm was still advertised there. And I flipped through to Limbaugh's, and I saw that his mother was still living in Cape Girardeau. And there's an address on there. So wrote all of that stuff down. We drove past the law firm where his grandfather worked. His grandfather, I think, passed away at 104. Rush used to have him on the show to talk, I think, during the 4th of July. And just an amazing man. He was an attorney. His dad was an attorney. And Rush's mom still lived there. It was a pretty modest house. We drove past it. I took a picture out the window of it, of the mailbox that said Limbaugh on it, and we drove on. Well, I kind of wished I'd knocked on the door now, because Rush told a story about when he started first getting nationally known, that a fan had stopped into Cape Girardeau and knocked on the door of his mother's house, and his mother graciously allowed the person to come in. They had coffee. They talked for a while. The guy talked about how much he enjoyed Rush and respected him. And she was just a pleasant person to be around. Now, I did tell David Limbaugh in that DM, I can tell you as an FBI agent with 20 plus years, don't do that. Don't let some stranger just knock on the door and invite him in for coffee. Do not do that. But this was a different time back in 1993. And it was just an amazing time. I'm honored to have this guy follow me on X. If you get a chance, follow him. He's really a decent, good human being, as Rush is. I told him, outside of my dad, that was the most conservative influence on me. Miss Annabelle Nichols, my Tuscaloosa Junior High civics teacher, was a huge influence on my conservatism. Justice Antonin Scalia, my hero, definitely an influence there, and Rush. And I hope David takes those words kindly. And I just appreciate the opportunity that he gave me following little old me on X, just this little old retired FBI agent. So as I mentioned, going to be a grandfather here soon. So it's moved the date up. We thought Sutton Grace was going to be here around September 23rd. My daughter-in-law told me that they've decided that because of how big Sutton's getting, that they're going to look at inducing her on the 16th. So the weekend before that, the 14th, the weekend of the 13th, 14th, I'm going to run over to Tuscaloosa and get my dad and bring him over here. He wants to be here, when his first great grandchild is born. And it's going to be an amazing time. I can't wait. I will share pictures with my friends. I don't plan on sharing those on social media, other than some private, pictures or something on a couple of platforms where I can kind of restrict the use of that. But we are so excited to have our first grandchild, and the fact that it's a girl, first girl born with the last name of Hinkle in 55 years. My brother-in-law is the producer here, is married to my sister. She was the last one to be born with the last name of Hinkle in 1970. So it's going to be an amazing time. We are looking forward to this growth here. My wife and I are going to, once Sarah Grace goes back to work and she's done with the maternity leave, we're going to try to keep Sutton Grace here with us, since we work primarily from home with a lot of the stuff that we do. And just an amazing time coming up. So look for us to pop up maybe sometime Saturday. We may do it tomorrow night. I don't know. We'll try to put together some prognostications about football and what we think is going to happen. We got Texas and Ohio State that's going to be playing. We got Alabama and Florida State. There's a lot of good football coming on this weekend. It's going to be an amazing weekend. Can't believe it's back here. But thanks again for tuning in on the Blunt Force Conservative podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, or if you watched us on X, go over to YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. That way you'll get some notifications when we're there. Follow me on X, recommend it to your friends. I pretty much follow back most people that follow me on X, so feel free to send me a follow if you so desire. But I do want to thank Betsy for coming on. She is a dear friend, and appreciate all that she does for the National Police Association. We will see you next time on the Blunt Force Conservative podcast. Thanks again for watching.